Hello, our topic is Essentials for Astrological Research. We're going to learn the most important things to do astrology research. And in this presentation, actually, this is going to be a series of presentations because I have a lot of information to share. I'm also going to make reference to additional tutorial videos that go into more detail. In fact, as I go through this series of videos on the essentials of astrological research, I will mention 16 other tutorial videos, and I have a link to all of those in the description of this video. So on the right side of this video, you see the description. You can also click on the icon to go into YouTube, and you'll see the description there, and you'll see the links to these 16 videos if you want to go into even more detail. So you can go as deep and as far into learning about how to do astrology research as you would like to. So a good strategy would be to watch this series of videos. And then after you finish watching this entire series of videos, if you want to go even further into this, then you can go to the description for this video and click on the link to each of those additional 16 videos to get even more information. Okay, now, first thing, let's go over what we mean by research, because sometimes people are doing research with a different motivation than the motivation that I'm assuming. I'm assuming that we're going to do research in order to better understand astrology. We want to get a better idea of what things in astrology, what zodiac signs or house placements or aspects are going to be associated with particular behaviors and personality traits. So how does the astrology work? Does Mars square Uranus really make people impatient and more explosive, etc.? That's what I'm assuming we want to do. Now, sometimes people have other motivations. Maybe they're trying to prove that astrology works to other people, whatever it might be. But let's assume that you're doing research to better understand how astrology works. Now, does that even make sense? Can we get just as much information or better information just by using astrology? A lot of people say astrology is a language. Just speak the language, do charts of friends and family, and if you're a professional, you see lots of clients. So is that enough, or can we get additional information by looking at databases? Would it really tell us something? So what I'm going to show you here is 11 things that you can do, guidelines for you that you can do in addition to what you already know about, what all of us already know about in terms of doing charts of friends and family and clients, which is very important. And that is also a form of research. Every time you do a chart, you're getting information about how astrology works. That is also research. But we're using the word research here to mean in addition to that. Are there things we can do? And wow, I am totally convinced, and some other people are as well, that when you start doing things like looking at databases or organizing what you've observed in your clients, so many things you can do that will just tremendously improve our understanding of astrology. So that's what our goal is. Are there things we can do to better understand how astrology works? Does a particular aspect have a particular effect? Yes, 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 there are, and I'm going to show you how to do it. What you can do in addition to your usual work with charts to better understand how astrology works. And it opens doors, it reveals things. It's amazing. Okay, let's start off with a scenario. Let's start with where a lot of us as astrologers are. If you're a professional, you have clients, and you have a lot of observations from your clients if you've been a practicing astrologer for a long time. Let's suppose that you've been an astrologer for a long time and you keep files of your clients, and you happen to have 10 charts of people who've been diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Can you use these 10 charts to conduct research? Is it enough data? Is it something that could be done? Or is that chart data just something for your own personal experience and you cannot use it to transition to a more formal way of doing research? Can we use this data? And if so, are there good ways to research the data? The answer is yes. 10 charts of people diagnosed with ADHD, or 10 charts of your clients who share something else in common that, reasonably unusual, that not the majority of people have. This is excellent data to use for research. It's excellent data for a first phase of research. And you don't have to go beyond that first phase. You can organize information about those 10 people to come up with some very interesting insights into what could be going on with ADHD. And these would be ideas that we can have more confidence in than just your sort of random observations about the charts. So yes, you can. And in addition to the fact that you can get some good information from those 10 charts, those 10 charts can also be a building block for additional research that would give us even more insight into what is in the charts of people with ADHD. So you do not need huge databases to do research, or with hundreds or thousands. You do not need to have control groups. All those things are wonderful, and we'll talk about what the term control group means and all that as we proceed through this series of videos. But just to let you know, there are things you can do from where you are as a practicing astrologer to make contributions to better understand astrology by using research methods in addition to just what you have to notice in doing charts. So here's a preview to the 11 topics I'm going to cover. I'm not going to read all of this, but I've put this up here in case you have a lot of understanding of research methods. You're wondering if you're going to get much out of this, or maybe you just don't know. Am I going to be talking about a lot of heavy-duty statistics, and is this going to be just some boring thing of that nature? So here's a preview. We will not be emphasizing statistics or technical details of research methods, like different sampling methods and things you learn about in an introduction to statistics course or something like that. That's not the emphasis of what I'm going to be presenting here. Some of the videos that I share, of those 16 videos we link to, go into more details about those things, but this is a practical guidelines for things that you can use to begin research, and most of it does not involve abstract things. I'm starting with what you're doing and how you can contribute to understand astrology better. Okay. By the way, let me go back to this. If you want to, just pause the video and read this if you want to. So I just want to mention that. Okay, let's start with the first of the 11 guidelines for doing research. Number 1, build models properly using exploratory research first. So what you want to do, if you're interested in ADHD with these, and you have these 10 clients who have been diagnosed with ADHD, is you want to explore the data. Do not go in with a specific hypothesis. Some people think that research is all about having a hypothesis, like, I bet people with ADHD have Moon square Uranus and Mercury square Uranus with a certain orb. Let me test it. That's something you get to later. So what you want to do first is what we call exploratory research, which is exactly what it sounds like. Explore the data, let the data inform you, and later you can develop a specific hypothesis if you want to, if you get to that point. You got it? So point number one, do not jump in with strict assumptions about what's in the data. It's good to go in with ideas. You've got ideas of things to look for, like maybe Moon-Uranus aspects, maybe Mercury-Uranus aspects, maybe certain zodiac signs, whatever, maybe certain fixed stars, whatever ideas you have. That's good to have some impressions, some ideas for things to look out for. But do not put blinders on and narrowly focus on just that. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to start this exploratory research with two essentials. First thing is you have to have a question. What is your research question? I'm going to use this scenario where our research question is, do people with ADHD have something in common in their birth charts? And it's often good to write it down. Write down what your question is. It's like a lot of things in life when you want to plan something. When you write it down, you realize some details or ways you want to phrase it. It can become clearer what exactly the question is. And this is one of the things in doing a more formal research is you're documenting clearly what you're doing. And one huge reason why this is so important is to help other people who want to build on your findings. Because we do not want a situation where every researcher starts from the ground up all over again. If one person can build on the research of another person, it speeds things up tremendously for us as a community to develop a greater understanding of astrology. And if you do not explain exactly what you're doing, people will guess, and they will usually guess incorrectly because there's so many possibilities. So you might be surprised at how defining things clearly can prevent problems later. There's a tendency to think it's pretty intuitive and obvious. I don't need to state all this stuff. And then when someone picks up with your research, they've made very different assumptions. Very different assumptions. So you state everything very clearly. What is your question? And we'll state it as follows. Do people with ADHD have something in common in their birth charts? Obviously, there are hundreds of thousands of possible research questions. And here's our first additional video that you could watch. I recommend you might want to watch these after going through this entire series. But I have another video on the basics of research. It's called How to Conduct Research, Guidelines and Suggestions. And it gives some guidelines and suggestions from a different angle, a different point of view. So it complements this series of videos very nicely. And as with all of the videos that I will mention, additional videos, there's a link to it in the description to this video. Okay. So first you have a question and you have data. So those are the two essential things. What do you want to research? And do you have some data to research? So in our example scenario, the birth data we have is the 10 people with ADHD. And let's assume that we have AA data. In other words, we have the times from a birth data or birth certificate. And let's assume that you've consulted all 10 clients. So these are clients of yours that you've consulted. So therefore, we have good data. We have good information about the people. We have a very limited number, only 10. Now, let me introduce another term for you, cleaning the data. Sometimes we need to clean the data, and examples of cleaning the data would be removing charts of people who do not have AA accuracy. Or perhaps you did not consult them very often. Maybe 8 out of the 10 people you consulted in detail, they spent time telling you about themselves, and maybe you want to only research those 8 that you know a lot about. That would make sense. So what you do is set clear and unambiguous rules for what data you are using. You can set a cutoff point. Like I'm only using charts of people that have spent at least 20 minutes telling me about themselves, and I've spent at least 1 hour in consultations with. You just create some kind of cutoff point. This is so tremendously helpful for anybody who wants to learn from what you did, wants to apply what they've learned from you to their own charts. Even if they are not going to do a formal study, even if they're just looking at a family member or a friend who has ADHD and they want to see what's going on, by you making it clear, they may realize, well, gee, I have this friend with ADHD, but I don't know that person that well. That would not fit within the context of what this research was about. Excuse me, or I may not have the birth time, etc. So you make it very clear. So these are some preliminary things. When I state these, it's obvious. And it may seem a little bit tedious to have to go over all these basics. But if you don't do it, your research is sloppy and we don't know what's going on and it's hard to build from it and we don't know exactly what we're concluding. So that's the first step, is explore the data. Don't go in with a specific research, and be clear about what your question is and what data you're analyzing. Now you're ready to do the data, the exploration of the data. And one wonderful way to explore the data is to use what we call data visualization. Data visualization is very often just graphs, the kind of graphs we all know and love and are familiar with. It's a simple idea. We all know about graphs. We see them all the time. Some of the most wonderful things you can do in research are not some huge technical new breakthrough. They're things you already know about. You just need to use them. So, for example, let's pick a different topic from ADHD. Suppose I want to know what's in the birth chart of people that are singers, professional singers. They have these great voices. Some people say Taurus is related to singing. Some people think maybe Cancer because of the personal, emotional expression involved. Do sun signs, moon signs, rising signs, maybe the sign of Venus, do they really have anything to do with singing ability? And sometimes you will hear people discuss these things and say, oh, I think Sun in Taurus is good for singing. No wonder you're a good singer. We make statements like this all the time. Well, is it true? We can actually look at the data and find out. Excuse me. So in the Sirius software, there are lots of data. There's happens to be 1,497 singers. This is in a database that we're about to release. I'm making this video in July 2021. It'll be out by the end of 2021. This is the latest, most improved version of the database. But you can use whatever version of the Sirius software you have, and you'll get very, very similar results. But I just happen to be using the latest database that I'm putting together for future releases. But anyway, we can just look at the data and see, and there's the graph. There's the graph. A data visualization is more helpful than specific numbers because you can get a better feeling for the results. And having a better feeling is more important than having some specific numbers. And I can look at this graph and I can go, ooh, Aquarius. Most singers have Sun in Aquarius. It's the number one sun sign. And you might think, well, gee, that's surprising. But Taurus is second, and I kind of suspected that Taurus would be strong. Cancer, which I thought would be strong, is actually one of the lower ones. You start getting impressions. You start getting ideas of what's actually going on. And then you may say, well, gee, why are all my friends who are singers, they have Sun in Pisces or Moon in Pisces? Probably has more to do with you and what you attract and what you're interested in and what your friendships are about and the kind of songs that they're singing and kind of music that you're interested in and the kind of attitude. So this information, looking at this graph, tells us what's going on out in the world separate from our personal worlds. Very informative. So a lot of what goes on in astrology is discussions about what people's personal impressions are. Discussing what they think is in the charts of singers and astrologers and psychics and da da da. Why not just look and see? So, from a modern point of view, this is tremendously helpful. And then combine that with your personal experience and your understanding is the ultimate. To have somebody deeply engaged in astrology and also look at the data to help make sense of it, figure out what's going on. This is huge. And I and some of my research friends were making incredible discoveries all the time by using things like data visualization. Let me show you very quickly how to bring this graph up so you can do this if you want to. Let's see, let me get out of this. I was doing something here. Okay, let me get out of this. So here we are. I happen to have singer Katy Perry up here, but we're not going to be looking at her chart. We're going to go into the research. So I click on the research icon, and it's over here, zodiac signs and houses graph specific factors. This button right here, first button under specific factors. And then I select a category. Right now I have astrologers. I'm going to change the category. Go down here to select a more specific category. And then I get all these categories, and I want singers. And they will be over here under musicians, singers, etc. And there they are, singer. So I've selected singer, okay. And now it tells me my category is singers. Okay, let's see what's in the chart of singers. And I select A signs, planets and zodiac signs. And let's do all 12 signs. I don't want to limit myself to one sign. Let's look at all 12 planets and all 12 zodiac signs. And let's look at the sun sign. In the tropical zodiac, harmonic 1 means the normal natal chart. And here I can select accuracy. I could limit myself to just AA with a birth certificate or A from memory or a news report. Whatever level I want to use, I can do A or better, B or better, etc. Let's use all of them because that way we'll have more data to base it on. The more data, the better. And if somebody was born in the afternoon instead of 12 noon, which was assumed or something, and the sun sign changes for a few people, it's not a huge problem. Because let's guess that 1 out of 100 people's sun sign will be wrong. Out of the 1,400, maybe a dozen people will be assigned the wrong sun sign, probably less than that. It's not going to dramatically affect our results. It's called measurement error. A little bit of measurement error is tolerable. It's not likely to change the overall effect. And you can go back and do it for just AA data or A data and see how it compares. In exploratory research, we're using a lot of intuition and a lot of common sense. We are not locking ourselves down to very, very strict technical observations because we're exploring. We want to get a sense of what's going on. So you have to use common sense and good intuition and good sensitivity as an astrologer to what you're looking for. And if you make the right guesses, if we guess correctly that it's okay to use all the data and we guess other things, then the actual astrology will begin to reveal itself and will begin to get confirmed. So this is how research is actually done. It's not this rigid, technical, numerical thing that's imposed on life. We're letting the information come out and speak to us. So we click on calculate, and then it goes through. It's just showing me what it's determined the sun sign is for all of the people, and it's done. And there are these specific totals, and it tells me there are 1,497 Is that the number I said there was? But anyway, that's what it is. 1,497. This is the number of people. But more important than these specific numbers is data visualization. And right here it's graph. Click on this little button, graph, and there it is. That's what we just saw in the PowerPoint slide. Aquarius highest, followed closely by Taurus. Let's see what's next. It looks like probably Libra, but Aquarius and Taurus stand out almost the same at the top, and so on. Aries is very high, Libra. And also interesting to note is what's low. Scorpio is low. That might be somewhat surprising. So there you go. You get a graph, and what you're really interested in here are the extremes, like Aquarius and Taurus come out strong, Scorpio comes out weak, for example. You do not have to summarize every detail of what you're seeing perfectly. You're using this to see what strikes you. What do you notice? And what you notice might be different from what I notice. That's fine. This is the exploratory research phase to build your impressions. And where you go from here is up to you. You're exploring. You're on a journey. You're not on a strict logical path. What do you want to do next? Did you see anything interesting here? Do you want to say, this doesn't look interesting. I want to go on to aspects or fixed stars or something else. Or maybe you want to say, I wonder if the moon sign or something else. Let's go back, just as an example, click on Venus and see what the Venus sign looks like. So it's almost done, and then I will click on graph. Here we go. Click on the graph, and Virgo comes out high. So I'm getting something different. Aquarius shows up high for both sun sign and Venus sign. Are these random fluctuations? Is this just what happened to be happening? Or are we really noticing something about singers? It's up to you. With the exploratory research, it's up to the researcher. The researcher must have expertise in the subject. Someone who's not an astrologer cannot do this exploratory research very well. It requires an astrologer who has a lot of intuition, a lot of experience, who knows how astrology works and can pull out from this what's going on. Okay, so you're getting ideas, and you could start to make sense. Would it make sense that Venus in Virgo would help? As an astrologer, you start getting impressions of what's going on here. So what happens by doing this data visualization is we are seeing what is actually in the charts, not just our personal opinion and our personal impression. Huge new levels of insight into what's going on. Let me show you another example of data visualization. Let's jump over to a different group of people, astrologers. There are 1,020 astrologers in the database. What do you think might be in the charts of astrologers? So instead of signs, let's think about aspects. Maybe Mercury, Uranus. So here's the point again. Instead of going in and saying, I bet astrologers have Mercury square Uranus or Mercury trine Uranus, explore. By exploring, what we're going to do is we're going to see how the angular distances are distributed. So we explore the whole thing. You do not put blinders on. So the first thing I'm emphasizing, rule number 1, and we've gone into a lot of details about cleaning data and having a good question, etc., all under this umbrella topic of explore the data first. So in the Sirius software, there are 1,000 astrologers, 1,020 astrologers already included, and I can look at what the angular distances are between Mercury and Uranus. I can create general trends, and I'll show you how you do this. It's very simple. And here is the angular distance between Mercury and Uranus from 0 degrees to 180 degrees in 10-degree blocks. So this first point is 0 to 10. What this is telling me is that very few astrologers have Mercury conjunct Uranus within a 10-degree orb. From 0 to 10 degrees, very low. 10 to 20 is high, 20 to 30 is high, 30 to 40 is high. 50 to 60 is very low. 60 to 70 is very low, and so on. Very interesting. In fact, 50 to 60 is like almost none of them. So there is some big differences here. What do you notice as an astrologer? I'm noticing Mercury conjunct Uranus, Mercury opposition Uranus. That's strange. Not showing up. And also trines and sextiles appear to not be showing up. So we're making observations and we're noticing something that's perhaps opposite to what we expected. Instead of astrologers having Mercury-Uranus aspects, it appears that they lack Mercury-Uranus aspects. And I can get a more detailed view of this if I want to see what's going on. So here I've drawn circles around the values related to the sextile and the trine. This extremely low point, almost no astrologers having Mercury and Uranus between 50 and 60 degrees. This next one is 60 to 70, still low. And notice the same pattern repeated, almost identical, for 120 degrees. So within 10 degrees of a sextile, from 10 degrees before the sextile to 10 degrees after, and also within 10 degrees of the trine, very few astrologers have that aspect. Now, is it just a random fluctuation? If it is, it's a huge fluctuation. This is percent. 7% of astrologers have Mercury and Uranus between 30 to 40 degrees. And about 1% have it between 50 and 60 degrees. That's a huge difference. It's like 7 times, well, I guess that's 1%. It looks like it's probably 1%. 5. Oh no, it's 4%. 5, 6, 7. Oh, it's not that huge of a difference. You have to look at your scale. 7, 6, 5. It's about 4.5%. It's about 4.5% have Mercury, Uranus, 50 to 60 degrees. A little over 7%, 30 to 40 degrees. Well, that's still, pretty big difference. 4.5 versus 7. So you have to look at that scale to see exactly what's going on. Do you think it's random fluctuation? Do you think it's meaningful? Well, one thing we can conclude from this is that it's probably not the case that astrologers have Mercury sextile or trine Uranus more than the general public, because it's showing up lower. So the probability that it's actually higher than average is extremely low. So we've learned something. If somebody says, oh, you have Mercury trine Uranus, that's good for astrology? Well, actually, no, it's not. There's very good evidence that Mercury trine Uranus or Mercury sextile Uranus are not conducive to being an astrologer. Now, you may not like to hear that. You may disagree with that. You may wonder if this data really is so informative. Well, according to the modern world of academia and professional world, yes. You need to look at the data. So you cannot rely just on your personal experience, and you need to somehow negotiate what's going on here. So from my point of view, as a person who does use modern ideas for understanding how life works, I would say that we can very safely say that Mercury sextile Uranus and Mercury trine Uranus do not incline a person to be an astrologer, whether you like that or not. Interesting, isn't it? You can do research. You can jump in and discover things relatively quickly. You do not need huge control groups. You already have the data. You already have questions in your mind. And let me show you how you would do this particular research. Let's get out of here, and what we're going to do for this research is let's go all the way back to the beginning. When you click on the research icon here, you're going to select this one, Exploratory Research. This first button under Exploratory Research. And I'm going to change my category. Instead of singers, I'll select a different category, and I will select, it's over here, counselor, psychologist, astrologer. Okay. And I'm going to select the planets Mercury and Uranus. And I want angular distance. It's going to show me the angular distance between Mercury and Uranus for all astrologers. I'm not going to limit myself to look for just squares or triangles. I'm going to see what the distribution is. We call it the distribution. How many people have Mercury, Uranus at any angular distance? And I'm going to measure 0 to 180. I have an option here to measure, to 1 to 360. How far Mercury is past Uranus, because maybe the waxing trine is different from the waning trine. These are all things you can explore. So I will just do it the normal way and click on calculate. And there is the bar graph. Does not look like what we just saw, and it's over here. This little button line graph is wonderful. So sometimes these wonderful features are kind of hidden behind little buttons that don't look that obvious. So I click on line graph, and now I can do this. I can click on these options, and what these options do is they allow me to group together, a section, continuous section of degrees to get the overall trend. Here it is at every degree, going up and down. But if I do, instead of 180 sectors, this is 180 sectors because it's 180 degrees, that's every single degree. First one is 0 to 1, 1 to 2. So it's interesting to look at. We see some kind of jump here at around 30 degrees, and over here, it's continuously above average, around 150 degrees. Looks like 140 to 50. And then I can smooth it. This basically smooths it by putting every 2 degrees. So we're smoothing it. And now we can see very clearly a peak at around 150 degrees. Peaks around 30 degrees. A drop here around 60 degrees. And I can smooth it more. Now I'm going to go to 60 sectors. 60 divided into 180 is 3. This is every 3 degrees. And I can smooth it more and more. And now I'm starting to see very clearly this drop at 60, which I've already seen, and a drop at 115 to 120. See this valley here? So as I smooth it, it's showing me the same information that we saw less smoothed. And here is the graph I just showed you, using every 10 degrees with the drop at 60 and 120, also fairly low at 0 and 180. So even if these are somewhat random fluctuations, the possibility that it's inverted and Mercury sextile Uranus and Mercury trine Uranus are actually high for astrologers is almost impossible. Almost impossible. We're looking at 1,000 astrologers. And by the way, it tells me the average is 5.5. That would be right here. Halfway between this 5 and 6, halfway between these dashed lines is the average. So here at 80 degrees is perfectly average. Okay. Data visualization. And let me show you one more thing. We're running long on this video. We're already at 40 minutes, but let me just show you one more thing and I'll end this first video. Back to my PowerPoint is this. There is a way to to compare this, maybe I'll leave this for the next video. We're going to start the next video talking about comparing to see if this is really just the way Mercury and Uranus are. Maybe Mercury and Uranus don't sextile and trine each other, because Mercury is going retrograde 3 times a year, and Uranus is retrograde on a lot of the year, and all this retrograding and changing speeds. Maybe they just don't form sextiles around. Maybe we're looking at how Mercury and Uranus vary from each other, and this has nothing to do with astrologers. So we need a way to compare, to see if we're really seeing something in this data. And I will show you one quick way to get a good sense of whether we're just seeing the random fluctuation of what happens between Mercury and Uranus. Let me make this point clear in case you're not following me. The angular distance between Mercury and Uranus is not the same for all 180 degrees. Mercury and Uranus are going to tend to have certain angular distance, and we don't know what it is. It's not easy to know ahead of time, even if you're an astronomer, because of the complexity of the movements of the planets. From our point of view on Earth, the geocentric motion, with Mercury turning retrograde 3 times a year, it's a complicated motion, and we don't know what angular distances tend to happen by chance. And maybe that's all we're looking at here. So that's the last thing we need to verify. I'll show you how we can see if what we're looking at is just the random movement of Mercury and Uranus, or if it's really true, and verify that what I said. We need to do one more thing before we know if what I said is true, that astrologers do not have Mercury and Uranus in sextile or trine relationship. We'll start that in part 2, how we can compare what we're doing. So in this first in this series of videos on essentials of astrology research, to summarize some main points, start with exploratory research and use things like data visualization. You have lots of data already in the software that you can use to explore ideas and see what's going on, and you don't have to guess what sun sign is most common for astrologers or what Mercury-Uranus angles are. We already know. It's already in the software. There's a whole new world waiting for us to wake up to this information age that's available to us. Okay, we'll pick up with how we see if this Mercury-Uranus is really unique to astrologers or it's just the way those planets move in the beginning of the next video. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.